Hello there. I did my presentation on the Republic of Cuba. Now, a lot of people don't know, but Cuba is actually the largest island in the Caribbean and is divided into 15 provinces. A little bit about the demographics of Cuba. On the income index, they are rated at 0.593. On the gender equality index, it shows a low 0.356. Cuba actually has an HDI, which is Human Development Index, value of 0.78, which has risen significantly from a 0.626 in 1980. Interestingly enough, the health index rating is very high, coming in at 9.7. Cuba is ranked 59th in the HDI value. Now, Cuba has a life expectancy of 79.3 years and is ranked 38th in the world, close to the United States with an expectancy of 79.5, ranked 35th. Cuba has a total population with just over 11.3 million people, with 75% of them living in urban developments. Now, Cubans that are 0 to 14 years old make up about 19% of the population, with the 15 to 64-year-olds making up the bulk of the country at 70%, and finally 65 and over at 11%. The average years a Cuban goes to school is about 10.2 years, while Cubans' literacy rate is extremely high at 99.8%. The racial diversity is broken up as 65% white or Hispanic, 27% mestizo, and 8% black. In 2013, there were just over 130,000 live births in the country, which is actually a cause for concern because it's very low compared to the rest of the nations in the world. Now we're going to take a look at some of the cities in Cuba. The first is going to be Havana. Havana is the capital city. Havana has about 2.2 million people and very densely populated. This is where the Castros actually resided. Havana historically has been a vacation destination for Americans all the way up until the early 1960s when the revolution happened. As you can see here, the Straits of Florida, and you'll see just how close Florida actually is. This is Key West, where my pointer is. Key West and Havana, literally less than 100 miles. Americans used to go to Havana for prostitution, gambling, and the nightlife there. The next city, Santiago de Cuba, on the other side of the island, at 425,000 people living there. Fourth, Camagüey at 300,000 people, kind of right in the middle of the country. Fourth, Holguin at 275,000. And you can see here, this is a very densely populated city. And if we zoom in, you can actually see the 3D architecture of these buildings. Quite beautiful. Our fifth city is Santa Clara with 210,000. Santa Clara is actually a historic city, especially during the revolution with Fidel and Che Guevara. They actually took over the city. It was one of the first that they had conquered. And fifth, Guantanamo, with 200,000 people living there. More importantly, I wanted to focus on Guantanamo Bay. It's the U.S. naval base where we hold prisoners that are high-value targets, especially the prisoners from the September 11, 2001 attacks are held there. This has been a cause for concern and definitely a debate among Cubans and even Americans whether to keep this base there. As we move on, most Cubans speak the Spanish language, derived from the Canary Islands, while little English or Creole is spoken. About 85% of Cubans identify with Catholicism as their religion. There is also a small number of Protestants, Jews, and even Muslims. Now, a little bit about the history of Cuba. In 1492, Christopher Columbus claimed Cuba for Spain. Cuba remained a part of the Spanish Empire up until around 1898 with the Spanish-American War. Jose Marti, the leader of the Cuban Revolutionary Party, died in 1895. He was one of the main people that fought for the independence and later the independence of Cuba. Cuba gained their independence in 1902. Now, with the Treaty of Paris in 1898, Spain ceded Puerto Rico, the Philippines, Cuba, and Guam to the United States. From 1902 till the early 1959, the United States was intimately involved with Cuba. And from 1952 to 1959, President Batista ruled Cuba as a dictator back from the United States. During the revolution that ousted President Batista, he fled to Portugal January 1st, 1959. Two prominent figures in Cuban history rose to power: Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. Now, Castro had tried rebellion and revolt before, and was exiled to Mexico. That's where he met Che Guevara. Sooner or later, they came and successfully completed a revolution. During this time, President Eisenhower and even the President of the United States, President Kennedy, came up with the Bay of Pigs, which 1,400 exiled Cubans, backed by the CIA, went from Miami to Cuba to try to overthrow the government of Fidel Castro. They were unsuccessful. Also in early 1961, Cuba and the Americans had a very tense with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba was intimately involved with the Soviet Union, and they were backed by the Soviet Union. During the missile crisis, they came to agreement that they would withdraw missiles in Cuba if the United States would withdraw missiles from Turkey. And the U.S. couldn't invade Cuba. That was the agreement. Now, since 1965, there's been a single-party state, with communism being the party, closely related to Soviet Union. Fidel Castro has ruled the country with his socialist government for over 40 years, and now is replaced by his brother, Raul Castro, in 2008. Now, recently, there has been a renewed license for family members to travel freely, back and forth from Cuba to the United States. Cuba's national resources are sugar, tobacco, fish, citrus, fruits, and coffee. And they produce about 25% of their exports is nickel. Now, currently, there's an embargo by the United States, and it's been there for quite some time. The UN, the United Nations, pass a resolution every year for the embargo to be lifted, for the United States to lift the embargo off Cuba. Unfortunately, the United States and Israel never agreed to that. Now let's go look at some of the other countries that surround Cuba. Jamaica is one of the closest countries to Cuba. As you can see just how close they are. The Bahamas is very close to Cuba. Thirdly, Haiti. Haiti is coming up here right now. Haiti is very close to Cuba. Dominican Republic is very close to Cuba. And two countries that I wanted to highlight here. Mexico is very close to Cuba. and along with Mexico, the United States. These are Cuba's neighbors. Cuba has good relations with people like Venezuela, Bolivia, and even Brazil. Cuban relations with the United States have been strained, and the United States is always looking to extend the olive branch to try to find resolutions. One last thing I wanted to include here. Cuban healthcare has been highlighted in the world as one of the best, where Cubans take care of their communities, and they have a large emphasis on preventative care. Finally, Cuba is a great country with great benefits, and I'm sure we all hope in the future that Cuba can open its doors and the wall of communism can fall, much like the wall of communism fell in 1989 with the Soviet Union. Thank you.